a video. How about that?
Cool.
There we go. I'm a real person. Good afternoon.
A real boy with
I am,
no strings.
and I actually might keep this blurred,
Yeah, that's
um,
whatever.
because I got this light thing behind me that's really causing an issue.
Oh, is that like window?
It's a window, and we have like it's a very thin curtain on it. Let me see what it looks like without it. Yeah,
Boom. Mike, big mic check.
I think that's worse. Okay, I'm gonna keep it on blur, which I don't stereotypically like, but okay, cool.
Cool.
There we go.
What's going on, man?
Not much, trying to save the world. Uh,
That's a never-ending battle.
please. And the funny thing is, I'm trying to get this my fucking podcast up off the ground, and I am the limiting factor, which is I cannot blame anybody. So I'm actually gonna start doing what I need to do this weekend. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on at the same time, but
It's
I'm not
just,
complaining at all.
yeah, it's just time, It's like at some point, I think people like us get so busy, it just becomes a like, what can I cut? And there's not much to
Yes.
cut.
No.
And
And
yeah,
go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yes.
just like cutting into bone, and it's like you have these amazing things that are like viable, can work, and then it's just I was talking to a guy the other day. It's like the opportunity space is so large, the problem space is so large, and it's like your skill set, after many, many decades in a career becomes large. So it's like, what's the thing that I do that can have a big impact?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's you got to take time to think about it.
Well, and my thing is the podcast will really be the. Oh wait, is this the podcast, by the way?
Yeah, this is it, man. See, I like to keep it super authentic and
I
organic.
I thought about it. I was like, I think this is the podcast.
Yeah.
Um, well, thank you for confirming that.
Yeah. You've learned my
Um,
secret now.
which I'm okay with, but well, not really, but it's all good. No, it's fine. Um, no, what I was saying is that like I know that the podcast is going to be the way for me, the
Yeah.
most efficient, effective way for me to organize like the work that I do.
Mhm.
It's just that like I think this being my second go round, I think my expectations are higher, which I
Mhm.
also have to kind of like check myself. Um, because the first one I did all by myself, besides the audio engineering, did everything.
Mhm.
And but it's a lot easier because this time we want to do video. And
Yeah.
so that makes things more complicated because you have to worry about like, are your guests comfortable with camera and like, is the office set up, all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
it is not the same type of podcast by virtue of the video element. So that's
Yeah.
what's kind of keeping things not moving as quickly forward as I would like to.
Yeah.
But they're moving forward. People like us are probably pushers. So yeah,
Yeah. I found, I mean, I can tell you my experience with it. Like I was pretty deliberate about the way I set my thing up. And so it was like, I want to just test different tactics in the market and my content and message through different mediums. And the message for me was just like, hey, professional services stuff, right? Like
yeah,
business stuff, tech stuff, like things I know, right? So I know I have some asset there.
yeah,
And then I tested a bunch of different channels, like all the different media formats. I tested all the different social networks, all the different distribution mechanisms. And what I found is this is where I came to. So I'm 2 months in. I just broke 13,000 subscribers and I'm
perfect.
quadrupling every month. And
Wow.
I'm doing it in like an hour a day, 2 hours a day. And then for like a week, I didn't do anything. And it was
Okay.
all a hypothesis test. So what I found was like start with video, extract the audio from that, extract the text from that,
Yep.
put it through a podcast distribution mechanism through all the different like podcast like spaces and
Yeah.
everything else. And it really took off where other channels don't. I mean, a lot of people talk about like TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts and like Twitter. And honestly, I've found that those platforms, they might give you like a little punch or even LinkedIn. Like every once in a while, you'll hit something and it'll go.
Yeah.
But for some reason, like the podcast medium if you own your own RSS feed, which I think is critical on your property, and then you distribute it everywhere else, it really works. It really works.
So
And the gloss, I think the gloss almost takes up too much of your time and doesn't matter as much, at least in the early stage, because it's
and
the
when you say
message.
gloss, and when you say gloss, what does that mean?
Like
What do you mean by
spend
that?
2 hours doing an intro video and like getting like
I
really
got you.
high res, like thumbnail images for the title of the video. You know what I mean? And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
people skim past it. Like no one gives a shit. Like just get me to the meat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think two things. So I think the audience is important, because
Yeah.
I'm following a similar model, but I will also
Yeah.
say to you, people have gotten much more comfortable, and I would even say have moved away from overly produced content because
Yeah.
they assume that the quality of it is low, right? And so
Isn't
I
that
even,
weird?
which I mean, it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I find myself, because I'm such an OCD perfectionist, I like to produce what I like to see. But
Hmm.
to your point, I have to remind myself that that is not what the audience requires. They
Right.
require quality content, a message that they believe that you know about. They believe,
Hmm.
they want to see you as a subject matter expert. And so I am, and I'm guilty of this. I get caught up, even on the first podcast, I would say, I think it's a catch 22. I think the reason that I was able to achieve the success I did, being a brand new podcaster, having no experience,
Yeah.
not really having a brand, and getting, CMOs and CEOs on the podcast, was because
Yeah.
of my focus on the quality of the conversation and the content, and being
Right.
very thoughtful in really crafting something that was worth listening to versus just getting on and talking, right? Which some people
Right.
just get on and talk, and it obviously depends on your target audience. But I knew I just had to come to the game of like, okay, Jeff Davis is serious. Like, he's
Yeah.
not just like want to get on with the CMO and try to get a job, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Whereas I think now that the brand has matured and people know of me, and obviously we've launched Rev Engine, which is an extension of me, I think I ironically can, and I wouldn't say like put out shit, but I
Yeah.
can really focus on the conversation and not have to have all the extra bells and whistles to try
Yeah.
to establish credibility.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I've been grappling with, because I like the overproduced and like the really slick, and
Yeah.
that's just me.
Yeah.
But it's not always worth, like, what's the phrase? The juice is not always worth the squeeze, or the
Yeah.
squeeze, or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle,
Yeah.
but
And you know, I think there's a place for that too. I mean, nobody wants to watch the rough cut of Star Wars, you know?
yeah.
But at the same time, I think where the magic comes is like in the middle of that conversation. Like you just dropped Rev Engine, and the people that are listening are like, oh shit, what's that? Like, what are you doing?
Joinrevenue.com.
Yeah.
And I
Now a
didn't even
word
think
from
about
our
it.
sponsor. Yeah, no
Yeah.
sponsorships. This is
There
just
are no
real.
sponsorships. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
But please,
So
please go to the new platform,
yeah, so
joinrevenue.com.
I mean, so let's get into it. Like, talk to me. I mean, talk about the story. So let's give a little history about our background. So we both went to
Yep.
business school at Chicago Booth, classmates
Yep.
about a decade ago. And then you were more on, let's just call it go to market side, and I was more on
Mm-hmm.
like product tech side.
Yep.
So, I think I think it was interesting puzzle pieces, and we've stayed in touch over the years, just sort
Yeah.
of organically, which is super cool. So, like, take me through. So, I didn't even know you had this old podcast. Like, take
Now
me
you
through
do.
like that to like Rev Engine. Like, what do you want to do with it? Like, what's your outcome? What's the North Star for you?
So I'll answer that in two ways, and then I'll tell the whole backstory. So
Okay.
ultimately, at the end of the day, the reason that I started this work is that I was personally frustrated that sales and marketing didn't have a better relationship, because in my mind, I knew that when they worked together
Yeah.
seamlessly, that the power of that relationship, like, would like 10x, as everybody says, like the
Hmm.
growth of the company. And the
Right.
reason I felt that way is because I started my career in sales,
Yeah.
and I just used to get frustrated because I came from a very top down, like, marketing set strategy and sales executes, ivory tower. There's no feedback loop. Like, if it doesn't work, it's really your fault, right?
Hmm.
And I just never really understood marketing, because the way in which we engage was very like hands off, and like at arm's length. And so, ironically, to your point about business school, it is one of the reasons that I was motivated to go back to business school, and, you know, true testament to me being a little bit over the top, instead of just like going to the University of Phoenix. Because really all I wanted to do was understand marketing and have the language to articulate what I was, you know, trying to say.
Yeah.
But instead of going to like just University of Phoenix, I go, oh, let's just go to Booth, and then no one have a question that that I can be a marketer.
Right.
So if anybody wants the reason why I chose Booth, it was very much I want to prove to you that I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to get this degree from one of the toughest business schools to get into just to make a point.
Yeah.
Not exactly, but the reason I wanted to go through that rigor is I really wanted to understand marketing strategy, so that when I transitioned to that spot, I could always secretly advocate for salespeople, because I just felt like they were two totally different worlds. And back then, you really didn't transition from sales to marketing. Like, you stayed in that career path. Getting to the other side, it's gotten better, obviously. Was tough. And I will tell people, even coming in with a Booth degree and having the sales success I had, I was still like, well, do you want to be a sales manager? I'm like, no, I want to transition to marketing. I didn't get this degree in marketing just to go back to sales. Like, it's great. I did very well, but there's a strategy, there's a journey here, and you are not helping me get there. And it was really tough. Like, I'm telling you, interviews after interviews after interviews, just to come in to be a marketing manager in the same industry that I was in. So I wasn't a career switcher. I was just a role switcher within the same industry, healthcare to healthcare. So, any long story short, that really is what the impetus of why I do the work that I do. The long-term vision with Rev Engine and why I'm building it is that there's not really a central place for revenue leaders, as those head of sales, head of marketing, customer success, CRO, to really sit down and assess the health or the quality of the revenue engine, to say, like, where are we today? How dysfunctional are we? Why are things not working? And then be able to put together a really thoughtful and strategic plan to transition from where they are to this really highly aligned, high performing revenue engine. Like, there's different disparate pieces in different places. There's different software platforms that do great. And I love what we're coming out with. And some of them are starting to coalesce and do, you know, more than one thing, but there's not that strategic lens where I can say, okay, I'm a VP of marketing. I come in, let me assess what's wrong with, you know, this entire revenue system that's in my organization. And then let me think through what needs to be addressed first, like what is doing okay. Like, that is really ultimately what we're trying to build with Rev Engine.
Yeah. I think it's great. I think obviously everything comes back to growth, especially in the world I'm in, like high growth businesses, VC backed, even PE backed, and like startups. And it's interesting because I felt the pull even more precisely over the last couple of years. Like, I've traditionally been product management, and just the virtue of going product led growth is getting a lot of airtime on like the VC waves these days. And it's because of, I think, one thing: we want that growth, we want that revenue, we want those sales, we want that marketing engine, all of that stuff, and the product working together to decrease the customer acquisition cost. Because like just buying ads like doesn't work anymore. And like, you have to have some kind of human touch before that buy, especially with high priced items. I mean, specifically, I was working on products where the average price point, it's not like SaaS or ecom where it's like 30, $100 a month. I mean, we're talking 5-6 figures that you're buying through a website online, right? Like, imagine buying a car or a house in ecom, and that's where things are headed. And especially in B2B ecom, which we talked about like a little while ago, it's coming. So then I think my point is, I kept getting pulled into growth, and just by the requirement of the market, like, I've had to just get really freaking good at it. And so then it's like, you've got product, sales, marketing, and like, what's our loop? How does that equation work? What are the different conversion rates, and what are the levers, and how are they changing over time? And so like that, like, I almost think that triumvirate for you, like marketing, sales, product in a tech play, right? Like healthcare is a little bit different, right? But like in a tech play, that triangle, if that's working well, holy moly, like, you will get a straight line up and down of growth. Like, it will give you, I'm started saying it, growth so steep it'll give you a nosebleed.
I actually like that. I might steal that from you.
Yeah, use it.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, like, I've spent a lot of time, obviously, you know, besides running my own consultancy, in healthcare, in tech, and they are very, to your point, very unique industries. What I actually am passionate about, and it's not I've always been industry agnostic, but recognizing certain industries kind of have a very different go-to-market strategy. So, obviously healthcare with, insurance and payers and that sort of thing, which is unique. Insurance itself is unique. Tech, tech is unique as well. But where I don't find a lot of people talking about, and then I always try to incorporate them in my work, was what I call kind of like legacy industries. So this is industrial products, manufacturing, all of those industries, because and part of it probably is my bias. Like, everybody wants to talk about tech, and tech is hot and like all these things, but like there are things that tech is focused on, and things that tech can do that like a manufacturer can't do. But
Mhm.
those principles or those strategies are definitely applicable. And I would say, in many times, because that industry is just now understanding kind of like this whole new way of doing things, can make a significant jump in growth by just doing simple things, because their competitors are just not there, right? I feel like there's stark differences when you get into those kind of industries, where you can see a company that says like, we are moving forward and we are going to like really think outside the box, versus somebody that's saying like, we're doing well, we're growing, but like we're not doing all that extra marketing stuff and all that sort of thing. It's a stark difference. Whereas some of these other industries that are forward thinking, you really have to do something special to break out from the pack, and then you have to continue to do it because everybody catches up pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that digital transformation thing from like legacy business to internet, like
Yeah.
starting to access the market size that's bigger than anything else. It reminded me immediately of this site that blew up on Hacker News this week. Somebody posted it. It's called McMaster Car, and the website is mcmaster.com,
Uh-huh.
mcmaster.com. I'll throw it in the chat window
I
here.
am very familiar with the company. I didn't see the news though. What happened?
Really? Yeah, it's just like this is the greatest usability for e-commerce parts, because the search and the categorization and the grayscale product images
Yeah.
lets the user find, buy, check out and buy in like the smallest amount of time possible. And it just reduced friction for the
Yeah.
buyer, and it increased their revenue substantially. So it was almost a lighthouse of usability in an industrial supply space, which was super crazy.
Yeah, but I
Um,
mean, stuff like that is a perfect example of, this is the kind of innovation that you can do in the industrial space, right?
yeah.
It's very practical, but the impact of the business is huge.
Yeah, truly. Yeah. And then I had a friend I grew up with in the flavors space who, if you're listening, hey, buddy, they just started doing B2B ecom. So after I published that first video, he reached out. He was like, hey, man, what's going on? Let's catch up. Like, haven't talked in a long, long time.
Yeah.
And he's now like the president of this large like flavor manufacturing, like international, all of that stuff. And they produce different products. I mean, I can't get into it, but anyways, they were moving into like the e-com space where they would put their products up online, and then you would like basically a la carte select what you need and sort of check out. And then you'd have that like live video chat with a salesperson.
Yep.
Um, during that checkout process that follows you around to help you select and figure it out, almost like a retail space in cyberspace. And then one of my other buddies that I've worked with for like 10 years spent years building e-commerce for a steel company.
Mm.
So I just see all of these enterprise businesses like moving onto the internet and moving into this way. So I find it very interesting because it's almost like this motion that you've talked about, which has been like sales is in a silo and marketing is in a silo and product is in a silo. It's like they're getting smashed together where
Mm-hmm.
like your buyer comes to a website, they see things, marketing's getting them there, they see things, and sales is getting them across that finish line into that buy moment.
Yep.
And it's like you need the product to be there organized well, you need marketing to get like the group there, and then you need the one-on-one touch to like get them over the line. And that like football team, basketball team, baseball team mindset, soccer
Yep.
team, getting them working together, like if that's a well-oiled machine, I mean, that's exactly to your point, like rev engine, it's the
Yeah.
engine. So here's my question to you is like, do you design that stuff up front, or is it like just go, or a bit of both?
So, and stereotypically, like, in an established business, right? Like, and I want to be really clear about my POV, and other people can disagree with me. Every company has a revenue engine. There's a way in which you have a system that generates money, right?
Yeah, right.
The what I'm really talking about when I talk about rev engine is like, how do you actually optimize that and transform that to something that is really organized and is more predictable about its outcomes. And so for me, to your point, is that we have historically all operated in silos. Sales is sales, marketing is marketing, and the modern buyer, and a lot, and all of it's due to digital transformation. They just have access to so much more information that, when I talk about this in my keynotes and this sort of thing, it's information and quality, but in the reverse. So you think about like when you used to buy cars back in the day, like, we're probably aging ourselves, right? You turn 16, you get your learner's permit, and you go get a used car, right? You don't know anything about used cars, and you might bring your uncle that like says he knows stuff, but he really doesn't. You were beholden at the sales, right? You know this, right?
He
You were
doesn't know
holding
anything.
he doesn't know anything. He's just talking a bunch of like drinking coffee and talking smack. But the sales rep really held all the keys to the information because we just didn't have that information back in the day. So enter things like consumer reports. All of a sudden, I have all this information and all this data. I'm coming to you asking for something very different than what the old school used car salesman used to do. And a lot of companies are stuck in not understanding that they have to shift the way they sell in order to be more relevant to the customer. Even if the product's great, you have to shift the way you sell because the modern buyers' expectations have gotten so high, a lot of it due to their B2C experiences. So think Amazon, Zappos, all these great and very easy ways to buy. That has spilled over into B2B, and we assume that buying should be easy, but we have this weird mentality that we think that when people come to work, all of a sudden they become robots. It is the exact same people. They want the exact same stuff. So I talk about it. I actually was in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago at Sales Name Soiree, and I was talking about it. There's actually two transformations that have to happen at the same time. That's why when I talk about sales and marketing transformation, it is difficult, and most companies either A, don't want to do it, or B, it just takes them forever to do it because there's two things happen at the same time. So you have the functional transformation, so that sales needs to transform. So it's not the old school, always be closing,
right.
Hammer the phone, call 10,000 leads like that. And if you're still doing it, God bless you. But it just doesn't work, right? And I'm not saying cold calling is dead. I think it's a part of the toolkit, but it ain't the primary part of the toolkit. So that's that. And then marketing, same thing. To your point, you talked about ads. So just spending money on ads and like blowing it out and like doing the same thing and like getting banners, like that has not proven to be successful. Yes. So you have to first and foremost make those transformations and convince those leaders in those silos that they have to evolve their approach. Then the second transformation on top of that, because that was super easy to do, is that you now have to get those silos to work across each of the functions so that they actually build out a system that tracks the buyer all the way through and gives them what they need when they need it at the time they need it, and orchestrates this really easy user interaction with the company, because the buyer doesn't care if it's sales or marketing. They want the information they want. And if I know nothing else, and sales leaders will know this, the time that sellers are getting is at the end of the journey, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So if you are not connected at the hip with your marketing leader, if you're one of those old school sales leaders that says, well, I don't know nothing about marketing, that's their thing, and I'm out here selling, and my people got to sell, and I don't want them, I've heard this a lot, I don't want them reliant on marketing.
Oh, interesting.
I get the spirit of what that is, right? Like they don't want sellers to be lazy and not do the work. But you as a sales leader, your job is to get your sales team in front of the right companies, the right targets, the right kind of contact, and have the right kind of conversations. And all of that is being formulated by by marketing and what they're doing in the marketplace prior to your salespeople even getting on the phone. So those two transformations are happening at the same time, or need to happen at the same time. And that is why really shifting this, into a really high performing aligned revenue engine is difficult. There's not just one business transformation, it's two.
Man, that's crazy. That's really elegant, man. I haven't heard it quite put that way, but it's so right. It's almost like we've reached this precipice at the end of the mobile S-curve, and it's like everything is shifting yet again.
Yes.
And thank goodness, well, I'm not going to say that, but like COVID basically like lit a fire and made it obvious like how important this like transformation is, like just that idea of like we've been talking about it for a decade. Oh
Yeah.
man, now I feel it.
Yeah, in a
And
weird way, and I know to your point, you don't want to
yeah,
say this, it actually forced most
yes.
companies to leapfrog to probably, I would, and you can tell me more because you're a product guy, 10 to 15 years forward as far as like digital capabilities and building out
Yeah.
digital.
And I think just by virtue of working and spending a lot of time with early stage startups, it's you start from scratch. So there's none of the like existing old house infrastructure that you have
Yeah.
to like tear down, rebuild back up, make pretty again. At the same time, you're running a business. It's you can start fresh. And so that's also why I know that it's the right path to what you talked about, like these siloed transformations. Each department has to basically like go up a level of sophistication now.
Yeah.
And then the fact that they're all working together in this collaboration piece too is so huge and mission critical because I've found, I mean, I had a guest on the podcast. Her name, oh, her, you introduced me, Deb Mashik.
Oh, Deb, I love Deb.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All
Yeah.
her work is in my book. Like I love her work.
Yeah. And it's so true. It's like, it's basically like write the spec and be right, which is what do we do and make sure we're not spinning our wheels? And then how do we hand off things to each other? Like, what are the touch points? And that's it. If you can figure out how to like get the right instruction set and then work together and chop up those instructions well in a large organization
Yeah.
while you're also like pushing the ball down the field, it's so hard. Like, no one, I mean, you get on conference calls and people just look like dead every day, like haven't slept in weeks, haven't showered. There's like dishes piled up around their desk. And it's like, it's hard.
So
Like,
it's, yeah,
it's hard.
it's
We're
hard. And
competing at a very high level and everyone's going hard and it's
yep.
hard.
And to in a large organization, there you are fighting inertia
Yes.
many times
Yes.
because really trying to get alignment across different functions that have sometimes competing priorities, competing incentives. And
Yeah.
that's a whole nother pillar
Yeah.
of what we've talked about in my work. But doing that is not always accepted or well received is probably the way I should say it.
Yeah.
Even though in the long run, and here's what's the irony of it is going to make everybody's work easier and more effective.
Yeah. And
But
everyone knows it.
well, I don't think that that's top of mind. What's top of mind is how do I get recognition for what I'm doing and how to I check the box for my function. And if you guys, your work doesn't happen or does, I don't care, right? And it depends on the culture of the organization, that sort of thing. But I would say for many, incentives are not always aligned to the behaviors you want people to actually demonstrate. In case in point with marketing, and I talk about this a lot. Like if you look at the traditional marketing team, they act as a cost center. Historically, marketing has always been a cost center. And I was on the I can't think of his name right now. Salesman.org, I think is his website. His he's a podcast. It's actually a pretty good podcast. And so he talks mostly like sales leaders and sellers. And when I said that, he was like, wait a second, pause. You got to unpack this. Let me know what this means. I said, yeah, let me give you a heads up on how we get down over in marketing. Historically, we don't talk about ROI. And obviously depends on the organization and tech might be a little different, but I'm making broad macro statements.
Yeah.
It is, did you spend budget? Did you get leads?
Yeah.
But there's not to sit down with sales leader and say like, look, let's talk about like how this actually translated into opportunities. Let's talk about like, did this move revenue? And so at the end of the day, we are as marketers evaluated like, did you spend your budget? Did you spend all of it? And if you didn't spend all of it, we're going to take it next year, so we have less to work with.
Right.
And so I'm incentivized to spend. I'm incentivized to get leads. And so when you, as a sales leader, talk to me about like the qualities of these leads are crap.
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking at you like, I don't really care.
Right.
Like I do, but I don't, because I'm being measured on spending my budget and making sure that I get you 10,000 leads a month. And I've done that. Check and check. Right. Anything else is extra.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So people are not necessarily acting nefarious and want their counterparts to lose, but leadership is not really set the right incentives for people to exhibit the behaviors that
Yeah.
are collaborative to Deb's point and the
Yeah.
work that she talks about.
That's so true, man. Like the three things that came to mind were data lakes, omni-channel analytics, and buyer journey.
That is all I do all day.
Yeah, right? Because and the incentives thing, I mean, when I was back, I did it for like 5 years designing these like comp plans, like base bonus, long-term incentives, like perquisites, benefits. And it's like you got to figure out what the right answer is, and then you got to reinforce it with incentives because at scale, humans are computer programs and they're going to just do
Mm,
that thing. Like you just said, the computer program said leads, budget. And I totally hear that. Like it's a takeaway if I don't spend it. So it's like you're at the end of the month, hurry up and
right.
like spend the thing or into the year, into the quarter. And it's like it doesn't even matter because it's going to take away and then that affects my job. So it's like first of all, I got to protect my own department and people and like budget and everything. And it's like it just becomes this almost like infighting instead of us being all focused on the outcome we're trying
Right.
to achieve. And it's very internal focused and like fear focused. And that whole like Goldilocks buyer's journey, what that's like and what that experience is, and then like setting up systems behind that to track, measure, optimize conversion through those pieces. And then you get to, well, we've got like 100 different Marcom tools and Segment installed, and like none of the systems talk to each other, and it's too much data. And how do I even cross reference? Am I in a pivot table? And it's like, screw this. Like, I'm just going back to the old days. And
Yep.
you got to build all this custom stuff. And then you go talk to Accenture or like a dev shop, and you're like, millions of dollars, like all this time, like whatever, we're just going to stay the course. And it's like, so here's my question to you. Like, where do you start to show incremental value in
Yeah.
month one? Like, where do you start with this stuff?
It's a good question. Well, I think more than anything, how I feel about like the litany of things you can do, tech is always last. I like I'm sorry to
Hey,
say that.
man, these are fighting words. No, I'm
Tech,
just kidding.
well, in the sense that
True. It's true.
we
It's true.
try to throw tech like, oh, well, we can't do like the one thing that you find that people are complaining about. Oh, okay, we'll throw a tech solution at it.
Yeah,
But
right.
like, let's ask a deeper question of, okay, you can't do it,
Yep.
but why does that matter? And like, how does that connect it to the overall, like us, driving revenue? So I say tech is last because I always push back when people say like, oh, I should buy a CRM or I should buy this. I'm like, why? Why
Yeah.
are you buying it? What part of your strategy is lacking that requires you to buy this technology? And how are you, good question that a lot of people, or not enough people are asking, how are you going to implement that into the workflow of the people that are going to use it?
Mm-hmm.
Because many times it becomes more burdensome than it becomes helpful, or we already have the data internally, we just are not using it in the right way. So I went off a little bit on the tangent there. This wasn't your question, but I think it goes back to and this maybe the Boothy inside me, right? It goes back to strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to have a sound strategy, not tactics, not like what are we doing, how are we doing it, and reevaluating your go-to-market strategy. And I think a lot of businesses are not really willing to sit down and do that work because sometimes you can find out, like perfect example, this many years ago when I was working with a company and they were trying to really understand how they could optimize their spend. And what we found in having conversations is that their largest vertical actually was not their most profitable vertical.
Interesting.
So it brought in the most money,
Mm-hmm.
but they actually had another smaller vertical that actually had higher ROI. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, there's your opportunity. Like
Mm-hmm.
you just need to reallocate dollars to this one. And we have to figure out the numbers in order to, actually drive growth, right? Like that's a simple politically, not gonna happen. Because politically,
Yeah.
like this business unit is at the
Power
top or
games.
whatever, like it's not gonna happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? When clearly strategically it makes the most sense, but you go to that leader of that business unit or that function and say, I'm gonna take some of your money and give it to Dan
Mm-hmm.
over here, like that's not gonna go well.
Yeah.
So it's having those conversations that are uncomfortable, but like if the strategy is right, then we can talk about like how do we pull this through and like what's technology that's gonna. So that is where I would start.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's like figure out what the right answer is first, and then figure out how to implement it, which often comes down to people problems and
Mm-hmm.
like takeaways. And if you can shift the takeaway into a net plus or net positive, then I think that helps go a long way. But yeah, that's yeah, it's super interesting. There was something I was gonna say about it as well. I know what it was. So at least in my world, it, to describe this in like the product management um, wording, it would be figure out your growth lever and
Okay.
then invest in that growth lever. So for example, it was, you know, that one industry or that one division you mentioned was like, okay, maybe your North Star metric isn't revenue growth. Your North Star metric is like EBITDA or gross profit growth, right? Because
Right.
it's like I can spend $100 and get 200 or and get $100, but I get nothing at the end. It's just like spinning your wheels.
Right.
But like if I can spend 100 and get 200, then you want to do that. So perhaps the big problem is that North Star metric was tied to Division One when it should have been tied to Division Two because the metric was profitable growth, not just revenue growth. It was like it was EBITDA growth, EBIT growth, or gross profit growth was actually
Right.
the North Star metric. And then what drives that? And then once you, it's almost like this pyramid where you just like write down the equation, like, okay, gross profit growth, this division, what adds up to that?
Yep.
Okay, like here's the number of leads, here's the price per like sale or whatever, here's the conversion rates. Now, which one can I move most easily with the least amount of money? And then you just build that pyramid, and then you
Mm-hmm.
can see like which one is driving that revenue growth. And I think, I mean, that's the secret that I've used in the past is just figure out one, what can we agree on is like the North Star metric. It's like a huge debate. And then, okay, we agree on it. What's the thing that drives it? Okay, now what are the implications of that? And that's
Right.
where you get into like that people problem, the reorg problem. People like get shifted around and let go, and they're like thrash in the org, and it's just like chaos. And you forget to mention, like, look, like this is what's driving money, which then helps pay our salary.
But that there's a I want to say the right word would be I don't know if self-awareness, but there's an awareness of the macro environment of the organization
Yeah.
that is required in order for a person to understand and identify with that, right? Like you have to have the ability to say, okay, this is my part of the overall business.
Mm-hmm.
How am I impacting overall revenue, right?
Right.
And you may be a smaller part of the business, right? Like you have to own that and say, like, okay, I'm part of 3% of revenue, whatever. And
Right.
so if our, 70% of revenue business unit, whatever, needs something, I may not be happy about it, but like overall, that is going to make the company more profitable or whatever that is. We all win because we all have jobs, our stock price goes up, but you have to have visibility to that. And you also have to have awareness of that for you to be able to say, okay, this makes sense because stereotypically people only have visibility for what they're working on. And anything that deviates from like, I'm going to take your money or I'm going to do something different feels like an attack on them
Right.
when it really is you're looking at the entire system and saying your part of this needs to be recalibrated because we need this over here. It's not about you
Mm-hmm.
performing, it's
Yeah.
the overall system needs to adjust.
Right.
And most employees, for various reasons, and I'm not necessarily harping on people, just don't have that ability to be able to like see things at that macro level.
Yeah. It's true. And I think part of it is because like they haven't been exposed to it. Like
Nope.
part of it is like pushing that message down or across or up or whatever and having the, I guess, the mental space or the time space to be able to like really help people understand the reasons and the why. And I think part of the other problem too is like just some of this pump and dump hiring and just the fear that's out there that happened with COVID. And then again, now it's like you
Yeah,
hire thousands of people 1 month and then a month later you fire thousands of people. And it's like nobody can trust anything anymore. Like people are
it's
leaving.
true.
And so it's like, I don't care. Like, I know I'm probably not going to be here in a year because you're going to like dump me whenever something just doesn't go so hot because you made a bad decision.
Yep.
Or, I don't know, somebody comes along and taps me on the shoulder and pays me 20% more. Like, I'm outie. I've got bills.
Yeah. And I think part of actually building, and I'm not an expert in this per se, but building a truly customer centric organization, which is, and we have 6 pillars, and we can get into this later, but we have 6 pillars of the high performing revenue engine. And I actually started with culture because for long term sustainability of a revenue engine, you've got to change the culture and it's got to be customer centric. But in order to do that, to your point, you've got to build trust with the organization that you are going to have some sort of transparency with them about what's going on. I've been in a situation as a seller where like all of a sudden in Q3, the quote on one of my products went up, and people are like, "Oh, this is BS," and I can't believe they just want to suck more money out of us. But what I realized, because I had a broader view of the organization, is that one of our other products was tanking,
Yeah.
and they had to adjust. Right? Like, I'm not necessarily happy about it. Like, I got to go out here and sell harder. But at least I know, like, it's not like they're looking at Jeff Davis and they're like, well, you're doing pretty good on this product, so let's just 2x it and see if you can do that. Like, but people would actually feel that way. Like, oh, they're looking at my territory. And I said, well, it's not really what's going on. Like, we got to make up for this product. So yeah, you're gonna have to do something with this over here to make up for that. But if you don't see that, it feels very personal and it feels like you're being attacked.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like message plus context. And a lot of time we just do message or number and don't provide the context. And even with context, it's like we're emotional beings. It's like, wait, like they sucked at their job. So because I'm good, like I have to do more now and like dip into my family time or my personal life, or like my stress levels go up. Like fairness alert, fairness alert. And so it's just like damages. But to the culture thing, like I think people that have been around the block for a long time understand the value of culture, and they just, the longer you're in the game of business, the more it becomes like number one, like the most important priority.
Totally agree.
What is the definition of culture? Like, it's so fluid and changes because it's interpersonal relationship and the way it feels to show up at work every day.
But I feel like, and again, I don't know the answer to this, but when I think about culture, I think about the acceptable norms of the organization and the way in which people interact with each other. So when I'm thinking about like culture of like joining an organization, joining a group, joining a company, whatever that is, those are the two things that come to mind. And I'll give you examples. For instance, like when it comes from the standpoint of like cultural norms, is it okay to show up to meetings 20 minutes late? Is it okay to ghost people when you have a project or a meeting? Is it okay to not finish projects? Is it okay to not actually have metrics and KPIs around like projects and programs? Like those things to me are like the acceptable norms. And then the interactions with people, things like, is it okay to be nasty to people at meetings and shut them down and tell them to shut up? Like though, like, and you're laughing, but like I've seen all of these things happen. And you just observe and like you just create this like this mental bank of like, oh, okay. So it happened once. There might just be that person. If I keep seeing it, and like two things happen. If I keep seeing it, it's a pattern. It's like, that's part of the culture. Or you're ignoring it means that it's also acceptable. Like, oh, that's just how he is. But there's 5 of him here, and they've been here for a long time. So you have accepted this as part of the culture. So that's how I think about it. Again, I don't know if that's an exhaustive definition, but those are the 2 things that come to mind when I'm looking at, like, you say your culture is one thing, but let me evaluate if that's what's actually showing up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're firing off BBs today. Like you're on fire, because honestly, that is 100% the truth. It's this unwritten behavior. And it got me thinking about like pack animals in the wild. It's like this behavioral norms that happen that we don't write down. Like people say, what's our culture? We're friendly. Like we pay for parental leave. That's not culture. To your point, it's like, what is acceptable behavior and what is not? And we learn by observing. And then it's like, what gets beat up and what doesn't get beat up, and like what's acceptable and what's not. And I've thought about this a lot actually over a couple of years. Like in an interview situation, what's one question I could ask that helps me understand a company's culture? Because you can't ask, what's your culture?
Even if
because
you do ask it, the answer is not
yeah,
necessarily going to be what
it
it is.
doesn't give you anything. So the
No.
one that I came up with, and it's not great, but it touches on your stuff. The one I came up with was, how are decisions made? Walk me
Okay.
through how a decision is made in whatever department or organization I'm talking to. Because often, as we talk through that and unpack that, it starts to surface some of the behaviors, like who has the authority? What are the power dynamics? Like,
Okay.
what's
That
acceptable?
does.
What do they look at to make the decision? Like, oh, Frank, he's been here for 20 years and like whatever Frank says goes. Or like everything has to run through the CEO, and there's like a bottleneck problem in the company,
Yeah.
or it's like completely decentralized. Like everybody at the edge makes their own decision. The problem is like mining it back in the home office or in like central databasing or whatever the case is. And so you just start to learn a lot. And like that's the sharp wedge into having some of these more behavioral discussions. But
Yeah.
it's so hard. I mean, how many times have you talked to somebody and they're like, oh, yeah, seemed really amazing in the interview process. And day one, I was like, oh, cuss word. Oh, cuss word. What have
Been
I
there, done
walked
that. I
into?
was like, how did you dupe me into taking this role? And you clearly left a lot of stuff out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had and I won't get into the details, and I won't tell anybody who it is, but I actually had that conversation, and or that instance happened to me. Like I literally was there for a week, and I was like, I don't know what I signed up for. This is definitely not what I signed up for.
Oh man.
Totally not what I signed up for. And to your point, it was just by observing.
Yeah.
It wasn't that anybody was treated me wrong or did anything mean to me. It just was observing behaviors that I felt were unacceptable
Yeah.
or were dysfunctional. That's probably a better word, dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And it was just like, and when you see them multiple times, you're like, okay, this is a cultural norm. This is this, and then you have to make a decision. Am I okay with this?
Right.
Does it affect me, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, or am I not? And I think, going back to your point again, as you get older and you get more tenure in your career, it does matter
Mm-hmm.
because you can't focus on the work if you're in a culture that is counter to how you like to operate. It just makes everything exponentially harder to do because a lot of times people are not happy, not because of the work, it's everything surrounded by the work that they
Yeah.
can't get through to get to the work.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so true. Just BBs, man. Pew pew pew. No, like God, it's so true. It's like, I mean, I find myself in these situations. It's like there's so much that gets in the way of good work. And it's like I'm doing all this other stuff or administrative stuff, and like I can't do the thing that I'm quote best in the world at.
Yeah.
And like everything suffers. I suffer. And I think the thing that came to my mind as you were talking about this was like the boundaries that you set. And you have to really, as an individual, spend the time and have the experience to know like, where do I thrive? What am I comfortable with? Like, what does feel good or right or balanced or whatever it is for me? And then find a way to like find
Yeah.
that fit with other people or other organizations. Because if that fits off, I mean, there's like values alignment, it's just like interaction protocols, right? Like approval
Yeah.
processes, like review process, handoff, ops, like the whole thing, like payment timing, just the whole thing.
But I think it just and I'll talk for me. Some people may have found how to do this earlier in life. So, I'm in my early 40s. I would just say I did not figure out what those boundaries were probably to my late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah.
When I had established myself as a marketing professional or revenue, whatever you want to call me. I had a book and I had done all these things. And it took all of that really for me to be able to say, this is the way in which I operate and show up best
Yeah.
versus earlier in my career, which we're all taught to do. Well, I would say a large number of us are taught to do is adapt to the situation. And
Yes.
I'm not saying, well, actually, that's not the way I want to say it. Adapting is okay. It is, what's a stronger word? Assimilate. That's what I want to say. We're
Yeah.
taught to assimilate to the situation, especially early in your career. You have no credibility. You don't
Right.
have anything to fall back on. You have no evidence of like your abilities, etc. And for a lot of people, that assimilation really is sucking their productivity and their ability to actually do the work and show up and be great at what they do.
Mhm.
And I think as you get older, that turns into adapting to your environment, but also having clear boundaries of like, these are the things that I will deal with and that are acceptable. But if it goes into this territory, I'm out. And I think it's hard to have that when you're younger. I would say this generation, like millennial and whatever the one behind that
Gen
is,
Z, yeah.
I think that I think they have a better sense of that earlier
Yes.
because like, and there's a whole nother, we can have that conversation about like credibility and not having to go into business, and there's all these other avenues to make money, right?
Yeah.
But I think for our generation and boomers and that sort of thing, it's like, it takes time to be able to get there, to be like, nope, if I see these things, I'm out. Like this is my no-go zone. And then you can say like, look, I just don't thrive in environments that exhibit these characteristics. And then you make a choice to either move to another role, move to another group, move to another company, whatever. But I think that takes time to figure out what that is. Because early in my career, and speaking for myself, I just assumed everything was acceptable,
Yeah.
and that I just had to deal with it.
Yeah. 100. And same. I think it takes that time to become aware of it. I remember like for 3 years, I was just white knuckling and gritting teeth through really, really painful operations in a turnaround situation where I was also traveling almost nonstop
Yeah.
all over the world. And you don't realize it when you're in it, like how, and in different situations, you don't realize it until you look back on things and you're just
Yes.
like, man, like that really took a lot out of me. And I do agree with the younger generation. Like I think they've seen and been exposed to it with their parents, their older siblings, like us. We've talked about it.
Yeah.
The internet has exposed so much over
Facts.
just the last 10 years that they've paid attention and they're like, that sucks. I don't even want to get on that train in the
Yeah.
first place, which is like why I think everyone, this old survey where it's like, when you grow up, do you want to be an astronaut or a YouTube influencer? And it shifted.
I saw
And
that
now
shit.
it's like 0% astronaut, like 90% YouTuber, and then like 10% own your own business.
Yeah.
And it's just because like I want to get paid to live the lifestyle I want to live. And of course there's some that are like, I want to build the next Microsoft,
Yeah.
Alphabet, Amazon, whatever. And it's just you got to figure out like what makes you happy and then like set up your life for that. But it's not
Yeah.
easy. It ain't
But
easy.
I think a lot about, and I don't know why, because I'm not like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, but I think a lot about like, what does the future of talent look like?
Yeah.
Because it's weird. It's a little strange to me that in the economy that we're in, that you have so many roles that are open and cannot be filled, or people are not willing to take the roles. And I'm not talking about like low level, entry level jobs. I'm talking about like
Mhm.
real
Yeah.
corporate roles. And I think also a lot about like there being like this massive shift in what is required for like the future of work. And
Hmm.
so I don't know if you saw this research, and I forgot who published it, but they talked about the job description for CEOs shifting from more finance and quantitative skills to actually interpersonal and people skills, and that being leveraged higher than your ability to run P&L and that sort of thing. And so I was like, what does that say about like the future of work? Because that's a big shift.
Hmm.
And then you think about the average, worker in the organization. So I'm curious to see what 10, 15 years looks like when you have a lot of younger folks opting out of going into traditional kind of corporate roles,
Hmm.
creating wealth through real estate and YouTube and social media and that sort of thing. Because we have that cohort, and you need like just different skill sets. Everything is kind of transitioning to some sort of digital aptitude, no matter what function you're in. It's just gonna be very interesting. And I don't know the answer, and I know, but I'm like, I want to see how this plays out.
Yeah. I've seen, I mean, I can tell you like the executive management role specifically, like myself and others I've talked to,
Yeah.
it's you see the job rec and it doesn't quite capture it because you know exactly what's required in that environment, in that situation, in that company in order to execute against the goals and maintain it. And you walk away because it's unreasonable. The
Okay.
expectations have become so difficult and unreasonable because the competition is so fierce that it's like, man, I don't know if I can sign up for this. Like it's going to take a full hard sprint for like 9 months or a year, and I'm going to burn out. And what am I going to get at the end of it? Because guess what? My equity isn't going to vest.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to like go exercise those options and pay cash and then wait 10 years and you might fail anyways. So for like a lower level cash salary with like maybe a bonus or maybe not to performance to kill myself,
Yeah.
when the alternative is I can just go like send some emails or some notes or do my own sort of thing and like have a better lifestyle with the same amount of income. And so, like, as I've talked to world-class talent, because I did this from a product management perspective, I was like, what do you want? Like 100th percentile talent.
Yep.
And it was three things. I want to be 100th percentile compensation. I want to be paid out of
What
to
I'm
the
worth.
moon. I want
Yeah.
to get paid for what I'm worth, and what I'm worth is a lot. Number two, I want to have a huge impact on the world, which is why I go to these like giant corporations and like the big tech sort of thing.
Yep.
But number three, and this is where the big problem develops, is I want to work on something I'm passionate about and believe in, and I'm jazzed and fascinated by, which is like I jump out of bed and I'm just interested in it and I want to just see it go. And for some reason, large business, quote, corporate America, the amount of like matrix organization structures, approvals, like political stuff,
Yeah.
you just get bogged down. The taxes you pay in order to get anything out the door, you get so bogged down that it's that third piece where it falls over. And so this is why people become entrepreneurs and quit. And also why I hear a lot of engineers, for example, at big tech, and why big tech is having this productivity problem is I spend 5 hours a week working on big tech products, and
Yep.
the other time I'm spent working on an agency or my own thing during working hours, and no one knows. And this quiet
Oh.
quitting thing is really just I'm getting all three of that triangle, but I can't get it in one place.
Okay.
That's
Interesting.
that's where I'm at right now from the research that I've done. I haven't seen it written down. It's a hypothesis. It's not
Yeah.
100% validated, but it feels right.
That's interesting. Because I look at like the quiet quitting thing as, and I'm not looking as purely from a tech standpoint, but like people reevaluating what is important to them. And I don't know if work-life balance is the right way to talk about it, but I think it's reevaluating your values and people saying maybe I should value my family more, maybe I should value entrepreneurship more, maybe I should value learning more, and then acting accordingly, and not necessarily subscribing to this kind of traditional like your worth is tied to your title. I think
Mm,
that
yeah.
is dying a very,
It's
I don't know if it's a slow
meaningless.
death or fast. It's dying. I don't know how fast it's dying, but maybe a slow death. But because I think there's a good contingent of people that still attribute their worth to their title. But I think more and
Yeah.
more people are just like, yeah, so okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Especially if you come from startup world where I've already been a VP or I've been whatever, and
It's all
you
fake.
find that the title doesn't really mean anything. Now, when you're in a large matrix organization, it's very different because that signals to the folks around you to some degree your worth in the organization,
Yeah.
not as far as like worth as an individual, but like how you are valued in the organization, your worth to the system, so to say.
Yeah.
But when you come from startups and you've been in small organizations, you realize titles are just titles.
Yeah. I've found the whole title thing, it's like, who do I go to for what is really the answer to the problem.
Okay.
And the title is like functional, like what function are you in? Right? Like product, growth, sales, marketing, customer success, support, whatever, that's important. So I know who to go to for what sort of problem.
Yeah.
And then it's like leveling a little bit. Like, do I go to the person on the front lines? Do I go to like the boss's boss's boss? Like,
Yeah.
and there's such title bloat anyways, and every organization is like crazy and it doesn't matter. And startups are like, I'm the chief, I mean, like chief metaverse officer now. I saw this article. It's like getting $1 million salaries and like CAA is representing these people. And it's like, you can just come up with a
Whatever
combination
you
of
want to.
words and then put it under your signature in an email. And it's like, I'm chief orange juice officer today,
Right.
bringing in the OJ. Like,
I
what?
think, but I feel like that only works in tech. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
translate to like any other industry. Like I see some crazy stuff, like chief happiness officer. I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's maybe HR. But like you can't get away
Well,
with that
yeah.
with like most organizations outside of tech.
Yeah. No. And the big ones, it doesn't fly
It
because
does
it's,
not fly.
yeah, it's a hierarchical structure and it's, yeah, very rote in terms of how
Yeah,
everything, reporting relationships, compensation bands.
all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, cool, man. We're that was quick. We went an hour.
wow.
Yeah, like yeah, we're over time. So like any final words? Like what are you thinking about these days? Like where you want to head? What's your like Rev Engine is the next
Yep.
big thing and like getting that podcast going is like what's next for you?
Yeah, so I'm continuing on this road of aligning sales and marketing and developing a way for revenue leaders to really assess the health or the quality of that. And so Rev Engine is my passion project and what I've been working on. So right now the podcast is the immediate focus and just making sure that and I think one of the things that I got feedback on, and I know we're over, but the alignment podcast was you are able to talk across different functions about the same subject matter. And it's nice because I get to hear it from a VP of marketing, a VP of sales, a CEO. And I'm like, that is the intent. Like, I think that is why we're doing something different, is that I have a very niche topic that we focus on. It is, the entryway to building out a really high performing revenue engine is sales and marketing alignment. And I want to help people get there. Right. And so I think the only way to get there is to be able to develop something where we can have a holistic view of what it takes. And I think so many times we get focused on, this is a marketing podcast, this is a sales podcast, it's a da 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 podcast. And this, like, those are great and they're needed. They really truly are, but that's not what this is. This is one thing of like, there is a problem between these two functions.
Yeah.
And I look like they're the two biggest kids on the playground, because there's other functions we need to align with, customer success and finance and all sorts of stuff. I feel like if you get the two big bullies, sales and marketing, to get along and really become friends, everything else becomes infinitely easier. So
Yeah.
I say all that to say is that is why we're building out Rev Engine. Join revengine.com. The podcast will be next. And then, depending on, I really just want to listen. So depending on what leaders want, if that's masterminds, if that's events, I'm going to let, and this is not exactly product led growth, but I'm going to, maybe it's called insights led growth.
Yeah.
I'm going to let those conversations and the feedback I get determine what we develop next, because
Yeah.
ultimately I'm serving revenue leaders and helping them do it differently and do it better. So
Yeah, that's just good customer development. That's just good product management, is listen to your customers and then do what they want.
and ironically, it makes your job a lot easier,
Yeah,
because you're like, we built this because you asked us to, not
right.
like we built this because we felt like you needed it.
Yeah,
So, but
yeah,
that's what I'm working on. Besides just, just enjoying life. And I think if COVID, not to go back to make it a COVID thing, but I think if COVID has taught me nothing else, it's about like really just finding things you're passionate about, enjoying life, and just putting things in perspective. And I've done a lot of work around like meditation and manifestation and law of attraction and all those things that I think I probably started before COVID, but I think they were accelerated during. And I think it has created such a sense of calm, um, that like I think that we all need, especially right now with like everything that's going on. Um, it is something people really need to be investing time in. So that's my plug for, like, you can call it mental health or whatever, because I think it's only going to get worse, to be honest with you. Not to
yeah.
be Debbie Downer, but
Put your own oxygen mask on first, and then get to work once you can breathe. Yeah,
hashtag facts.
love it. Yeah, let's end on that one. That's a good note, man.
Yeah.
Well, super cool, dude. Like, I'm super glad you're doing this stuff, and I'm excited to see it come off, and count me in as a subscriber to the pod. So,
Love
yeah,
it.
shoot it over once you've got it, and
Definitely will.
yeah, we'll make it happen. It's
Cool.
gonna happen. I mean,
It's
it's just too big a problem. You
we
know, it's
don't,
an inevitability, so it may as well be you.
hey, It's gonna happen. I spoke it out to the universe, so it's happening, whether I want it to or not. It's happening. So
there you go. It's out there.
Yeah, we're excited about it. So
I love it, man.
I appreciate
cool.
the support.
Love it, Jeff. Cool. And
Cool.
let's catch up on Christmas again if we don't talk before then, like we did last year. That was fun.
Yeah. We'll do a better job of staying connected. But I'm glad this week you use this excuse to actually connect and catch up.
Yeah, that's the point. We just got to put time on the calendar. Otherwise, life moves too fast.
I agree with you.
All right, my friend. Well,
right,
have a great weekend, and loved your partner, your family, all of that. And yeah,
keep you
kicking butt.
All right. Thank you, sir. We'll stay connected.
All righty. Take care.
All right. Bye.